Welcome back. I ventured into the abandoned Cresson Tuberculosis Sanatorium, carrying with me only a camera and a flashlight. The place had earned a morbid reputation due to its tumultuous past, and tonight I was on a mission to document it. The building loomed like a sinister sentinel, an imposing shadow against the twilight. Once inside, an immediate sense of dread descended, chilling the air. The decrepit walls and rusted medical equipment silently narrated tales of their morbid past. Sounds of unseen entities seemed to echo from the bowels of the building, heightening my unease. I brushed off these disturbances as mere mind tricks. I proceeded further, the echoing coughs growing louder. I stumbled upon an old patient record on a worn-out desk. The name read, Margaret Bradley. Margaret's record indicated she was admitted to the sanatorium in 1930, at a young age of 15, with advanced tuberculosis. A sadness washed over me, imagining the young girl suffering. After a few minutes, I heard a soft giggle. It seemed out of place and sent a shiver up my spine. Ignoring the eerie sound, I moved further in, the coughing sounds now punctuated by this disturbing laughter. I entered a room where the laughter seemed to emanate, finding an old rusted wheelchair in a corner. Suddenly, the wheelchair moved, its rusty wheels spinning, as though an invisible entity had pushed it. Fear gripped me, but curiosity held me captive. The laughter grew louder and was now accompanied by a frail voice saying, "Help me." Frightened yet determined, I followed the sounds to an abandoned ward. As I pushed open the creaky door, a gust of cold wind rushed past, leaving behind the scent of medicine and something else, something sweet yet eerily unpleasant. On the floor lay a locket, tarnished by time. Inside was a photo of a young girl. Could this be Margaret Bradley? As I picked it up, the laughter intensified, and the plea for help grew more desperate. Suddenly, I felt an unseen force guiding me, leading me down a labyrinth of corridors. My flashlight flickered and went out, leaving me in darkness. The air was thick with fear and anticipation. Then my flashlight flickered back on, illuminating a door at the end of the hallway. The laughter ceased, replaced by a chilling silence. With every ounce of courage left in me, I pushed open the door. Inside, I found a bed, its sheets dusty with age, and the air thick with despair. I heard a soft sob, and then the voice, Margaret's voice I presumed, whispered, "Thank you." Confused, I turned to leave, only to find the door had vanished, leaving behind a solid wall. Panic surged through me, my heart pounding in my chest. I was trapped. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room as the bed was flung against the wall. The laughter returned, this time devoid of any humor but filled with an unsettling menace. Margaret? No, this was something else. The room plunged into darkness once more, the laughter now echoing ominously around me. My flashlight flickered on again, illuminating a horrifying sight. The room had transformed into a ward, filled with ghostly apparitions of patients, coughing and writhing in pain. Margaret appeared in front of me, her eyes filled with sadness and pleading for help. As she reached out to me, the apparitions vanished and the laughter faded. It wasn't malevolence I sensed, but a desperate plea from a trapped soul. With a sudden surge of determination, I reached out and clasped her hand. She smiled sadly, whispered a final thank you, and vanished. In her place was the door I had been searching for. I stumbled out, leaving the sanatorium, the night air crisp against my clammy skin. The Cresson Sanatorium was more than a haunting reminder of a horrific past. It was a timeless prison for those souls who had suffered within its walls. But tonight, one of them was free, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that Margaret's was the first of many such encounters I was destined to have. In the subsequent days, the encounter with Margaret haunted me. Her image was imprinted on my mind, her pleas for help echoing in my dreams. But there was something else, a sense of unfinished business. Margaret was free, but there were other souls trapped within the sanatorium's cold walls. So I decided to return, armed with more than just a camera this time, a recorder, holy water, and a newfound courage. I ventured back into the haunting silence of the sanatorium. As soon as I crossed the threshold, a chill swept over me, but there was something different, a sense of anticipation, as if the building itself was waiting for my return. A cacophony of distant, muffled coughs and whispers filled the air, growing in intensity as I stepped further in. I recognized these as echoes of the past, the ghostly imprints of the countless lives lost here. Suddenly, my recorder crackled to life, and a weak voice echoed, "John, I can't breathe." John Doe. The records indicated he was one of the last patients admitted to the sanatorium. He passed away the night before the sanatorium was closed. His final hours were spent alone, his suffering unheard. The sense of dread was overwhelming, but I had a mission to free these trapped souls. Holding on to that thought, I ventured deeper into the sanatorium, my footsteps echoing in the silence. My path led me to a room, remarkably preserved. In the corner lay an old leather-bound journal. I picked it up, dust particles swirling in the air. As I flipped through the pages, I realized it was John Doe's journal, filled with entries of his time in the sanatorium. John had documented his struggle against the disease, his loneliness, and his final days. His words painted a grim picture of his plight, of his dreams of a life outside the sanatorium that he would never get to live. The pages ended with a sketch of a small wooden house by a river, a place he had longed to return to. The room grew colder, and the whispers turned into a single, choked voice. "Home. I want to go home." In that moment, I understood. John wasn't just trapped in the sanatorium, he was trapped in his unfulfilled dreams. The realization hit me with a profound sadness. With a promise to help him, I exited the room, leaving behind the echo of his plea. As I walked down the hallway, the sanatorium seemed less intimidating. It wasn't just a haunted building anymore. It was a tragic timeline of countless stories, waiting to be heard, waiting to be freed. My journey was far from over. It had only just begun. I continued my exploration, the recorder capturing spectral voices and pleas as I delved deeper into the sanatorium. The spirits were communicating, revealing their stories, their unfulfilled desires. It was as if they knew I was there to help. Each room I entered bore witness to a different tale. There was the young mother who longed to hold her child again, the musician who yearned to play his violin once more, and the old man who simply wished to see a sunrise. Their stories, their trapped existences, imbued the sanatorium with an intense melancholy. Weeks turned into months, and each visit to the sanatorium revealed more about its ghostly inhabitants. Slowly, with each connection, each understanding, I could feel the spirits finding peace, their energies dissipating, leaving behind an echo of gratitude. One night, as I made my way through the now familiar hallways, I noticed a door that I had never seen before. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I approached it. I opened the door to find a room unlike any other in the sanatorium. It was an office, impeccably preserved as if frozen in time. A nameplate on the desk read, Dr. Harold Becker. Dr. Becker, according to historical records, was the last medical officer in charge of the sanatorium. His decision to abandon the patients during the sanatorium's final hours had resulted in a wave of deaths, including John Doe's. An intense cold swept through the room, and an overpowering sense of guilt filled the air. The pleas for help grew louder, resonating with a collective sense of betrayal. This room was the epicenter of the sanatorium's haunting, a place where hope turned to despair. Suddenly, a figure materialized in front of me. Dr. Becker's spectral form was fraught with regret. In a choked whisper, he confessed his guilt and expressed a desperate wish for redemption. I knew then that the sanatorium would never find peace until Dr. Becker did. So I set out on my most challenging mission yet, to bring closure to the man who had abandoned his duty and the souls he had left behind. The line between reality and the supernatural blurred in the ensuing days as I grappled with Dr. Becker's guilt. Each tormented soul he had abandoned was a story to be acknowledged, a tragedy to be respected, and a spirit to be freed. In the end, the sanatorium was more than a structure of bricks and mortar. It was a monument of collective memories, suffering, and desire for liberation. And I, no longer just a documentarian, had become their confessor, their conduit to peace. With each soul freed, I could feel the sanatorium shedding its haunting weight, growing less oppressive. My journey within these walls was far from over, but a newfound hope kindled within me, a promise to each spirit waiting for release, a promise of freedom from their eternal silent screams. The Cresson Sanatorium, Pennsylvania's most haunting medical facility, was slowly transforming into a sanctuary of whispered stories and freed spirits. Over the next several months, I painstakingly went through each patient's record, learning their stories and acknowledging their tragedies. Dr. Becker, in his spectral form, was always beside me, his guilt palpable. Each night we would venture into a different room, address the trapped soul, and encourage it to let go. The violinist at long last was able to perform his final symphony. The mother was allowed to feel the warmth of her child one last time, and the old man watched a beautiful sunrise. One by one they found peace, their spectral forms disappearing with a relieved sigh. Each successful encounter brought a sense of accomplishment, but the task was far from over. Dr. Becker's redemption and the sanatorium's ultimate liberation were directly linked to each spirit released. So we pressed on. Finally, after countless nights, we stood before the last room. The name on the record sent a chill down my spine. John Doe, the unknown patient whose lonely death marked the end of the sanatorium's operation. The room was as I remembered from my previous encounter. Cold, filled with despair, the air heavy with John's longing for home. This time, however, Dr. Becker was with me. As we stepped inside, John's spirit appeared, confused, weary, but recognizably calm. In an emotional reunion, Dr. Becker apologized for his failings, expressing his deep regret. John, after a long pause, forgave him. As he did, the room seemed to brighten. John thanked me, his spectral form slowly dissipating, leaving behind the image of the little house by the river he had longed for. With John's departure, a profound silence filled the sanatorium. It was as if the building itself had let out a sigh of relief. Dr. Becker's spectral form turned to me, gratitude etched on his face, and he too disappeared, his parting words echoing in the silence. Thank you. The Cresson Sanatorium had been a symbol of fear, a haunting testament to the thousands of lives lost to tuberculosis. Now it stood silent, its spectral occupants finally at peace. As I left the building, the first rays of dawn were breaking. The sanatorium, once a dreaded silhouette against the twilight, now appeared less intimidating, basking in the morning glow. My journey was complete. The spirits trapped within these walls were finally free, and so was I. The sanatorium was no longer a haunting ground, but a testament to redemption and liberation. As I walked away, I looked back one last time, knowing that I had left behind not only a building but a lifetime of memories, of sorrow, redemption, and finally peace.